Well, hello everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm Tim Murphy. I'm the Director of File-Based Solutions with Evertz. Yes, we do have a file-based solution within Evertz. So 4 years ago, I sat in the same meat locker and froze and talked about asset management, and and we were kind of at the basics back then. We've come a long way in the last 4 years. I mean, basics like acronyms, CMS, AMS, MAM, DAM. I said, oh, they all mean the same damn thing, and the same two people laughed 4 years ago. I talked about collapsible architectures, how these things are built for large scale, and it kind of unifies third-party components into a customizable user interface for your operations. And it's all about building workflows to really meet your business demands. And I'm happy to say, after 4 years of speaking at many lectures of smart people like yourselves, that we've come an awful long way. And I like to show this. Devin Croft always puts out the big broadcast survey. And this particular one, they put out surveys saying, this is stuff we think is the future. This one in particular is talking about projects that are actually funded in the next 12 to 18 months. And number one on the list is content management. Go team. Number 4 or 5, I can't count that far from here, is cloud services. So clearly, cloud awareness is growing. So a couple tidbits that I like to pull out of the survey and tell our salespeople to talk about when they're out there and with opportunities is things like, the cloud wasn't even mentioned last year. It was hardly mentioned. They put up the slides, got the pictures, and the bigger font is what's the more prominent stuff. 2013, it was a little, 2-point font thing in the bottom corner. 2014, front and center, which is awesome. And things like Amazon services wasn't even mentioned again a year ago. In 1 year, a prominent way people are using or want to use the cloud. So clearly, we've heard about it all day long. It's a growing need within our industry. So I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit about kind of the cloud principles and how we're looking at the problems as Evertz, how we're looking at best-of-breed technologies from the cloud and applying that to kind of media asset management, workflow management within our media and entertainment world. So first and foremost, they typically see it runs in an active clustered environment, which means it's highly available, highly resilient. Things like operating parallel tasks, right? We all have to micromanage and do multiple tasks, so why can't our computers? And that's something that we see often in the cloud environment. A little bit of a buzz term here, microservices. So microservices, something you're going to hear out of the IT world, you hear it from the likes of Twitter and Google, et cetera, is those kind of short-lived tasks, and short-lived as in I've got a job, I got to get it done, it has short length in time, and then I tear down that service and it goes and does something else with those compute powers. And then finally, and you see this from the likes, again, of Google, Twitter, Facebook, they've actually gone out and built purpose-built appliances to meet their demands. They were looking at the COTS environment, didn't do what they needed to do, at least at that time, and they actually went out and built their own stuff. So the software-defined networking, a lot of that thinking came out of that industry. And at the same time, using virtual machines, we talked about it all day long. I'm not going to tell you what that's all about. But the key thing here is that they run both or both of those under an automated control platform. Again, kind of the software-defined networking principles. So in our world, content management principle, and by the way, I use media asset management, content management kind of interchangeably, so I go ahead and apologize for that. But in our world, in the content management world, it's driven by business systems, right? Smart people making contractual decisions that lead to revenue. That should be the tail that wags the dog. So that is putting in the job request into your content management platform, which is then orchestrating the workflow and prioritizing those workflows, prioritizing the tasks, and the series of tasks become a workflow in order to meet some type of deadline, right? Whether it's got to be on Netflix by a certain day, it's got to be on my on-air channel, whatever it may be. I'm constantly churning through queues in my environment, which ultimately is creating this large kind of what I call the fan-out world, the one-to-many. How do I get through large volumes of assets in very short-lived timeframes like a microservice? And then while in flight, how am I constantly prioritizing those queues in order to sync up a distribution in order to meet the deadline, right? And at the end of the day, this is just a highly automated factory approach to getting that one-to-many out there. And I can't slow down, I can't stop the production line constantly. So I'm only raising the issues to an operational level that are truly trouble assets. Otherwise, put it in a quarantine and move on. And that's how you essentially gain the true digital factory approach. So in order to do that, again, taking a step back, there has to be an architecture evolution, as I like to call it. And we've heard this a couple times today. So in the existing world, kind of in the automation world and in the media asset management world has been guilty of this over the years, is the active-passive one-to-one highly available platform. So I've got my what we call our X side and our Y side. X side is primarily online. My Y side is waiting for something to happen. I fail my entire system over. I repoint my IPs, et cetera, over to that side, which is great. It's worked to a certain scale, and then there's clients who have gone beyond that type of scale, this type of architecture. It also means that you're building for the peak, right? So, each one of these blades in a HP chassis, for example, has a particular purpose. It could be a database, it could be the user interface presenting the web pages out to our operators, automation, gateways, et cetera. But the point is, those blades have one purpose in life, and for the rest of their lives, that will be their purpose. I'm a user interface blade. I will always be a user interface blade, which means, again, it got us to where we are today, but you're building for the peak. I'm building for the worst day possible in a year, and I'm got, not only my X side is primarily running online, but I've also got this redundant system that's sitting there essentially doing nothing other than taking up space, drawing power, and creating heat. But again, it's a highly available type of architecture. So if you kind of apply that to a workflow, just a very simple workflow, you got your business system scheduling requests into your factory. I've moved the file into an ingest process, move it off to my central storage, go through some type of transcode process, and then get it out for distribution. So that's kind of the world, the linear world that we've been living within. Oh, and of course, most importantly, you're updating your business systems when those tasks are complete so that those smart people over there are trying to make money know that that's been done. In this new world, though, where we're going, is a true kind of cloud environment, the active cluster architecture, where what I call the non-core nodes, which are things like your database, for example, right? I can't afford for that to ever disappear, so I need that to always be available. But everything else, all those blades that were dedicated before, now look like one big compute node to me. It's one large available resource. That means all those static tasks, that task that was always going to be a gateway and always going to be an automation blade, have now been completely eliminated. And it also now enables you to go to this componentization and microservices architecture, which I will speak to in a couple of slides. But most importantly, it completely removes from that equation that X and Y, that N plus M redundancy model, into an N plus N kind of self-healing type environment, which allows you to react differently. So what does that same workflow look like in this new world? Well, still making business systems requests. I'm still getting files in, but now I can start to operate things in parallel. I sync up at distribution, but now I can scale out. And then I can go through my distribution platform and tear down those services. So same workflow, just applied a little bit differently. So the key to this is elasticity, or as many people call it, the cloud. This is a change in thinking for us as a broadcast industry. We're used to working in our kind of network monitoring type systems, looking for issues, reacting to issues, and hopefully automating a response to those. But in this nonlinear world, I don't have patch panels available to me to go patch out, take it to a scope, and figure out what the issue is. It's all ethereal. Remember, this is all one big compute node to me now in this new world. So now we need to start looking at the problem differently. We're looking at what are my compute nodes doing? How much memory are they using for this particular task? What's the CPU load? Is it just overheated? Did I lose the power supply? It's a different way of looking at the way we handle it. And we can use that then to kind of create that self-healing environment that I talked about. So in this case, this is not the best diagram, but it's one I whipped up. On the left-hand side here are the series of tasks that I need to do in a particular queue. And on the right-hand side are my compute nodes available to me. And in that little blue box right in the middle is a particular task. So I now know that I have a task. The red stuff is not going to get done because I don't have enough compute nodes available. But I have an available node somewhere in my factory, and I can apply that now to the system to meet that deadline, to meet that volume. It also means that if a node were to die, I can automatically self-heal once again to shift my load over to another available resource. So a little about components componentization of microservices. Again, this is a term you hear out of the IT world. So the black boxes here are representing a compute node available within my factory. Kind of the outline of that is the 100% utilization. The blue boxes are what I call a static task, or you'll hear it often referred to as a componentization task. And what those are the 24/7, has to always occur type tasks, things like automation for play out on air, right? That can't appear on me. And the orange boxes are the microservices. So those are the short-lived tasks that I have compute nodes or compute power available within a node, and then I can go in and schedule to get these short-lived tasks done, and then I can have multiple of those within a node. And you scale out horizontally with more compute nodes. So how do you do that, or at least how are we doing that at Evertz? So we went out and looked at, again, what Google and Twitter and those guys are doing, and we're not going to reinvent the wheel. They're doing a really good job at it. So they all got together. They created this platform called Apache Mesos. And what Mesos does is two things. One, it ensures that those 24/7 components are always operating. And if something were to happen to those nodes, it will make sure that it moves those 24/7 components to another node or run them in parallel for redundancy models. It also makes use of available resources. So those orange boxes in that previous slide, it's aware of. So it's the whole idea of just, I've got this one large compute node, it's abstracting all the CPU and storage and memory and all that garbage that comes with it. And it just abstracts that up to a framework that someone could take advantage of. In our case, hopefully a media asset management platform. So a little bit how it does it. So this is kind of 1, 2, 3, 4. So step one, you've what they call a slave. It's a compute node. It's available within my factory. It reports northbound into this case, a Mesos application layer that says, I've got a microservice available that's, it's got 4 CPUs, it's got 4 gig of memory, whatever it may be. It kind of presents the DNA of what's available up to this layer. It then can forward that off to a framework. So we've applied the content management or the MAM application as the framework. Because remember, I'm collecting all this analytics, and I go, okay, I've got a deadline to meet. I've got a microservice that fits this bill. I've got something that's a transcode, let's say, and I've got that 4 gig of memory and CPU that fits our bill. So let me put that task or that job back into Mesos, and Mesos then issues it down to that slave. So kind of the 1, 2, 3, 4. But at the same time, remember that we're collecting all the analytics of these systems. So, again, this is not the NMS world. This is what's the memory utilization, what's the job look like, what's my CPU load, et cetera, et cetera. And we're also collecting, because we are a content management workflow platform, we know on average what it takes to get through a particular task. I've got a 1-hour XDCAM file. When I apply that 4 CPU example to this, I know it's going to take X amount of time to get that particular job done based on the history, because I've got this massive database now available that's collecting all these analytics. Which means, and this is where it gets really interesting, because I have the deadlines coming in from my business systems, and I've got all the historical data available from my compute nodes within my data center, I can now actually start to make predictions. Because remember, a workflow is a series of tasks. I know how long those tasks take based on a rolling average, say, over history, and it becomes a simple equation. I add X plus Y plus Z minus the deadline. Am I going to meet the deadline? No. So what do I do about that? Well, there's interesting things that you could do. You could steer the workflow. You could say, well, here's another available workflow path through your ecosystem that maybe bypasses a manual step that is traditionally the kind of the long pole in your tent for that particular workflow. So you can start to make operational decisions on how you want to get around these deadlines. But it also means we can start to apply cloud-based architectures. So again, Mesos is telling me I've got these available compute resources. Your framework, your media asset management layer is going, great. I've got this need. I'm going to miss the deadline. So I've maxed out what I've got on my own 4 walls, but I've got these, say, virtual machines available to me, because Mesos has told me. So you can actually dynamically now to kind of what I like to call reshape your system. You're trying to create additional CPU nodes to go and do that particular task, and then you're done, tear it back down and put it back into the pool. I am talking really fast. You're going to go early, Carl. So, we've talked about this a lot today. Kind kind of different architectures, and this is the way I see it. So there's the idea of an on-premise, optimized hardware. I'm the Googles of the world, and I want to control my own destiny, so I build my own server architecture within the four walls to meet my demands. So there's a lot of pros that come with that. They're purpose-built machines. They're going to meet the peaks. They're very, very predictable, right? I know exactly what I'm going to get out of that node. Security, I'm not a security expert. I'm not going to claim to be a security expert. But clearly, if it's in your four walls and you control your world, very secure way to look at this. And these are very easy to now model out, right? I'm a content distributor. Someone's dumped, someone in marketing has said, I need to onboard this new platform for distribution. It needs to be done by tomorrow. It's very easy now to model that out because I've got all those analytics to say, yep, I'm going to meet the deadline, or no way, not going to happen. Go change that deadline. The cons in this model, once you've reached that kind of on-premise peak volume, you have to keep adding heavy iron, right? Essentially, you have to keep building for your worst day, which means it's an ongoing CapEx investment over time. Generic hardware. So this is the idea of introducing virtual machines or using things like SaltStack to go reconfigure existing infrastructure within your ecosystem. So it gets you truly into the COTS model, right? And you can follow Moore's law and all the efficiencies that come and simplicity that comes out of the IT industry. Also makes maintenance very simple. You're up to, I think we spoke about that earlier. Of I don't have to go and reconfigure a million things. I can spin up virtual machine. I get one virtual machine right, and I can spin that up a million times. That makes the maintenance of this very simple. And potentially it could open up the idea of load sharing with other departments. A simple one might be your IT department. They've got these available VMware UCS blades maybe sitting in a data center. They're normally just cranking through emails. They're running at 50% capacity. Maybe I can start to shift some of my loads into an existing capital expenditure that the company's already made. The cons, I kind of feel like you're still building for your worst day in this scenario. Although you are sharing potentially with an IT department. Is that a risk? I don't know if I can answer that. I think it certainly is a risk that someone else could steal your resources that you think are available to you from a content management perspective. And then finally, and this isn't a slight on anybody, but there are still a number of vendors out there that are tied to that kind of dongle model, right? It's a license associated with, say, a CPU serial number and the whole concept of how do I scale up and down to meet kind of volumes of your needs doesn't exist yet. So as an industry, we absolutely need to work on this. But I'm encouraged to hear quite a bit of it today. I think we're heading in the right direction. Private cloud, this is very popular. So this is kind of the in your four walls or even an outsourced kind of colo data center type model. So again, very well protected. It's under your control, so security is hopefully less of an issue. Provides very simple connectivity to other data centers, particularly if you're in a colo type model where you're essentially leasing racks in an Equinix or someone like that, and they've got that kind of global connectivity for that large geographic reach, which opens up some interesting kind of business models and resource sharing that once you're in these well-connected facilities, I actually have clients that call it the follow the sun model. When LA is very busy, perhaps their LA data center is very quiet because there's not a lot of operators working through the middle of the night. So can I actually start to use that existing infrastructure of these well-connected data centers to actually just shift my load over there during quiet hours? So it kind of technology reduces it down to zero. It's a nice model. A lot of people are starting to consider. And as I mentioned, if you're in these hosted kind of colo data centers, the connectivity out of these places is absolutely insane. You can get anywhere in the world. And I'll show you just Amazon's in a couple. But it opens up interesting opportunities to, for particular workflows. And we talked a lot about transcoding and that, how that environment scales up and down in a cloud environment. And for me, it makes a lot of sense if I'm doing IP distribution or I'm connecting to CDNs to go ahead and start shifting my workflows into that type of environment. Cloud services, another kind of IT buzz term that you're going to hear probably more and more over the years. Ways we're looking at using this, just simple things, like we're taking baby steps. So I think I talked about it earlier, but with Avid, just where is my content? Just a simple interface to go into your UI, I'm looking for this material title, and oh, it's living in LA, or it's in my New York City, whatever. Just a very simple tool utilizing the cloud just to find stuff. I mean, you wouldn't believe how difficult that is for very large organizations. Other things, just aggregating site reports from sites, I mean. So technical stuff, what were my compute nodes doing at this particular time when this task failed? Well, now we've got a really extensive logging system to go, well, that node was doing this, and it had this much memory, and it failed because of this. So very technical type reporting, also operational type reporting. Because again, we're into this massively scalable database that I can throw everything at it now. I mean, not only logs and what's doing what and memory usage and all that, but who did what? Who are my rock stars in my organization, right? This guy cranks through 1,000 assets a day, and this other one gets through 1 or 2. And by the way, he refers it to a supervisor. So all that kind of, you mentioned earlier, you guys are using Elasticsearch. We are as well, because it was built by Twitter, scales out unbelievably, and it's we'll never touch its limitation within the media industry. So we can create these really rich analytical type reports that the kind of C-level people are just wanting to get. But it's very difficult as digging through Excel sheets today and correlating data, and hopefully it all lines up. By throwing this all into these big databases now, it's not only easy to create these reports, you can put it right into your user interface, which is a really powerful tool. And again, it's a smart use of your global compute resource. So again, that follow the sun model. How do I shift my load from one data center to the other, giving peaks and valleys within my organization. And then finally, the public cloud. And I'm not here to say put everything in Amazon. The total cost of ownership earlier was interesting for me, because I'm still trying to figure out, is that a way to save money or not? But it does get you into the complete virtualization, a completely hosted model, and it opens up opportunities for vendors such as us or service providers to do the software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service. There's a million acronyms, but essentially, it ain't my problem. It's someone else's problem to figure this out. The pros in that model, there's essentially no CapEx up front, right? You're shifting your load out to someone else. Once you're in these data centers, I've said before, the shifting, moving my work from one data center to another, super, super easy. Sharing distribution models, the CDN models. Again, we heard it earlier from Elemental and Telestream both. Direct CDN models, once you're in a public cloud environment, is dead simple. So if you have workflows heading in that direction, this is maybe a branch of that workflow you absolutely need to consider. And this hasn't been brought up today, and I'm kind of surprised. Some of these cloud providers out there actually offer lower cost for what they call off-hours compute power. So I can actually, when they have slow times in the day, they actually publish a different rate card, which is really interesting. So if you have this content management system that's aware of the shifting of that rate versus the deadline, you can actually start to look at business model. We can actually automate shifting work into these off hours and saving some money. So I think that's a really interesting one to consider. The cons, again, I'm not a security expert. There's a perception out there that it's not secure. If Amazon was here, they'd tell you that I'm wrong. And I'll let them defend that. File transfers to typical cloud providers like an Amazon is not that expensive. It's when you get it back out. When you need that stuff back from the cloud guys, is an exponential cost. So that's something to consider. Now I know we have a lot of clients looking at baby steps again, right? I'm going to use S3 and Glacier as my archive. It's my DR archive. Getting it there, pretty simple. When something goes wrong, got to get it all back. Not cheap. And that goes to the earlier point about just connectivity. And you got to consider what are my level 3 costs, for example, to get to these meet me points at these data centers. So I find this quite compelling. This is straight from Amazon. I didn't make this up. And I'm not saying Amazon's the right way. They give me a lot of literature. But their footprint is incredible. I mean, you can get to literally, except maybe Canada, I'm not sure what's going on there. You can get to just about anywhere in the world once you're in their footprint. I mean, so that's why that CDN model, the shifting my workload around the world, I don't want to say it's simple. These aren't remedial tasks we're trying to solve, but the architecture's there to allow us to do it. And again, and I loved Elemental's thing with the step, and then the kind of the burstiness of my load. But it, it's that whole concept of what this line in the middle here is my peak capacity. I've built something in my four walls. It will only do, a million things a day. And once I go past that, I either miss my deadlines and upset the CFO, or do I look at other options? So once you're in something like that public cloud environment, or I'm hosting it in a colo model, shifting it to the other data centers, like I showed over there, is dead simple, right? This enables that type of architecture. And then finally, and I kind of, my gut feeling is I think this is where we're going to end up as an industry, at least say in the next 4 to 5 years, is a truly hybrid model, right? I build something on premise, and I have particular tasks and workflows that make a lot of sense to do it there, right? It could things like your post-production environment where you got heavy assets. Because remember, putting them there is not that expensive. Getting them back, getting a ProRes 220 file back out of Amazon into my local post environment is going to be pretty example. Sorry, Avid, I should. DNX files are really big. But you maintain that control. I truly think this is where we're going to end up. There's workflows that make sense to do within your four walls and offload those kind of elastic in nature. I'm going to a CDN. My ultimate archive is sitting in Glacier. I'm a distribution company and I want to go all IP. Moving those type of tasks into the cloud environment, for me, I think makes a lot of sense. And it opens up other opportunities, kind of business opportunities to work with other third-party vendors. I mean, I have a client that's putting their finished kind of transmission assets in a private cloud environment, but they're offering out kind of a public cloud storefront for their third-party post houses, let's say, to actually order, you send in the work order, it's going to, Joe Blow's post house, he gets a work order, and allow this orchestration system to just move the assets to kind of their landing pad. So it's like, it's a no-brainer. They don't have to think about, is it in LA, is it in New York, but my Japanese translation's in Tokyo. All that gets completely abstracted in that type of business model. And the only con I could, other than maybe security, I'm not gonna get into security, is the upfront cost. I mean, truly, if you're gonna do a blend between on-premise and offloading stuff into the cloud for that kind of burstiness model, you still have to build some stuff in your four walls, and that costs money. It's just life. I wanted to show this. It kind of addresses the question earlier about the networking. There's kind of, and then this is an Amazon specific, and they have this thing called Direct Connect. So they live in a data center. It's typically somewhere like an Equinix. They're leasing racks. I mean, that's the God's honest truth. And there's two ways to kind of connect your network to that. So you do the kind of dark fiber through a level 3 or something like that into a meet-me point in these type of colo facilities. And it's literally, it's a piece of fiber, it's another piece of fiber, you patch and your networks are connected in a secure cage. Or you could have that hybrid model where I actually build my own kind of private cloud environment in a leased rack, and I still go to that meet-me point, and I use the available resources within Amazon or Azure, or whatever it may be, to kind of do that elastic scaling out of the burstiness of when someone in marketing said, we got to get 1 million Disney assets out to Netflix by tomorrow morning. Good luck. So this is an interesting one. This kind of helps in that, and I'm not sure of the economics of this, but I think getting the assets back out of Amazon in this model to a direct connect is cheaper. So this is a potential opportunity for some efficiencies. So finally, sorry, I talk really fast. So we're at a pivotal point in the industry right now. I mean, 4 years ago, we were talking about acronyms. Today, we're talking about how we can do this in the cloud. They're shifting business models, clearly. I mean, my 5-year-old daughter only watches stuff on iPad. And it's creating challenges for us that we can't necessarily monetize in this industry. But, as an industry, as a vendor, we're looking at those best-of-breed IT practices from the likes of Twitter and Google. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We'd like to take those technologies that they've created, and by the way, most of this is open source stuff, so none of this is proprietary, and bring it into kind of our media and entertainment ecosystem and apply our use cases to it. And finally, as I showed, there's several ways to kind of skin that cat and approach this solution, whether it's you build it on site, you do a hybrid of the two, you go all cloud. My point is, I want to get across that when people talk about the cloud, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go into a hosted environment. You can absolutely build that same type of cloud infrastructure within your four walls, or you can take advantage of the compute resources that someone in a hosted environment like an Amazon or Azure can offer to you. That's my spiel. Questions?
So